أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. We know that the companions of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt had a tremendous effort in preserving the teachings and narrations of their Imam. This is something very evident. We see that they wrote down the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, they preserved these narrations, and they passed them down from generation to generation. And a hadith by Ali ibn Hanzala قال: سمعت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام يقول: اعرفوا منازل الناس على قدر روايتهم عنا. Know the value of people according to the amount of narrations that they narrate from us. So the respect that was given to the companions of the Imams, it was based on how many narrations, the quantity and the quality of the narrations that were transmitted by these companions to later generations. And so we see a phenomena of several top companions of Ahlul Bayt preserving the traditions of the Imams. And the Imams, they encouraged their companions of preserving these ahadith, memorizing these ahadith, writing these ahadith, preserving them, passing them on to further generations. The Imams would say, يأتي زمان لا تستأنسون إلا بكتبكم. A time will come that you will only seek solace in your books and the ahadith that you have preserved from us. So they took this matter very seriously, writing down the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, memorizing them, passing them on down to generation after generation, making sure that these ahadith were transmitted and recorded as they were heard from the Imam, without additions, without subtractions, being very accurate in how the Imam stated the hadith. It was transmitted as such. And hence the idea of al-usul al-arba'mi'ah came to being. The idea of the 400 usuls, the 400 books of hadith. So the companions of the Ahlul Bayt, starting from the companions of the 5th Imam all the way till the end to the companions of the 11th Imam, they collected books later known to be as usul. They are the original sources of hadith. 400 original sources of hadith called al-usul al-arba'mi'ah. They preserved these traditions. Perhaps one companion would have several usul, or each one would have an asl of his own. Muhammad ibn Abi Umayr had an asl of his own. Umar ibn Udayna had an asl of his own. They wrote their books and they collected these traditions. Some were categorized in specific categories. For example, Umar ibn Udayna collected the hadith pertaining to inheritance. Muawiyah ibn Ammar, one of the companions of Imam Sadiq, collected the hadith on Hajj. And so we see that in the field of Hajj, most of our hadith are transmitted on the authority of Muawiyah ibn Ammar, and so on and so forth. And so they collected these ahadith. They preserved the ahadith. And they also founded the science of rijal, the biography of these transmitters. Because it is not enough to preserve the hadith and transmit on the authority of the narrators, but we have to know about the narrators themselves. Are they reliable? Are they not reliable? Were they imamis? Were they zaydis? Were they jarudis? Were they waqifis? What school of thought did they follow? Because that has an immediate effect on the quality of the narration that they narrate. So they instituted ilm al-rijal, the biography of narrators and transmitters. Who were they? Are they reliable? Are they not reliable? And then towards the era of our eighth Imam, Al-Imam Al-Rida alayhi salam, Al-Imam Al-Jawad, after him, Al-Imam Al-Hadi, Al-Imam Al-Hassan Al-Askari, a group of companions became known as the scholars of hadith, those who preserved these ahadith and were able to discern from what is authentic and what is not authentic. Such companions include Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa al-Ash'ari al-Qummi, Sa'd ibn Abdullah al-Ash'ari al-Qummi, al-Hossein ibn Sa'id al-Ahwazi, Muhammad ibn al-Hassan ibn al-Walid. These were the top scholars, jurists from the companions of the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt, they had companions that were not simply transmitters of hadith. They would say what the Imam said. No, they were scholars, they were jurists. They were able to distinguish between the authentic narrations and the dubious narrations that were transmitted from earlier scholars. And so then came the time of the three Muhammads in Al-Ghaybat Al-Kubra, in the greater occultation. Muhammad ibn Yaqub Al-Kulayni, Muhammad ibn Al-Hassan Al-Tusi, Al-Shaykh Al-Tusi, and Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Babawayh Al-Qummi, Al-Shaykh Al-Saduq, Al-Shaykh Al-Tusi, Al-Kulayni, and Al-Shaykh Al-Saduq. They compiled the four great books of hadith, Al-Kafi, Man la yahdhur al-Faqih, Al-Tahdhib, and Al-Istibsar. These four books of hadith, they were compiled from the original 400 sources. They had the 400 sources amongst them. Today we don't have these books. Why? Because we have compendiums like Al-Kafi, Man la yahdhur al-Faqih. They also filtered out what is authentic from what is not authentic, and that is how Al-Kulayni wrote his Al-Kafi. There was a process of filtering these ahadith, making sure that these ahadith were authentic, they were compatible with the Quran, and so on and so forth. Later on, during the Safavid period, three other Muhammads came and also authored three very important works of hadith. You have Al-Alam Al-Majlisi, Muhammad Baqir Al-Majlisi, who authored Bihar Al-Anwar. You have Muhammad ibn Al-Hassan Al-Hurr Al-Amili, who authored Wasa'il Al-Shi'a. And we have Muhammad Al-Fayd Al-Kashani, who authored Al-Wafi. Also, they filtered out certain narrations, and they gathered a lot more narrations. So, Al-Hurr Al-Amili in Wasa'il Al-Shi'a, he gathered what is in Al-Kafi, Al-Tahdhib, Al-Istibsar, Man la yahdhur al-Faqih, and he added other sources to formulate Wasa'il Al-Shi'a. And so did Al-Alam Al-Majlisi in his Bihar Al-Anwar. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, what is the criteria to accept any hadith according to the standards of our ulama? There are two main conditions. There are several conditions, but we can deduce these conditions to two very important conditions. Number one, the chain of narrators has to be credible. All of those in the chain of narrators, starting from Al-Kulayni, who authored Al-Kafi, all the way to the Imam. For example, there's 6 or 7 transmitters. They all have to be credible. They have to be thuqat, reliable, truth-speaking. Not one of them can be a liar. So this is one. And this relies on ilm al-rijal, on the science of the biographies of narrators. We have to discern who is reliable, who is not reliable, who is credible, who is not credible. And number 2, the second foremost criteria to the acceptance of any hadith, compatibility to the Holy Quran, muwafaqatul kitab. Is this hadith, is this narration compatible to the Quran, or does it conflict with the Quran? It goes against the Quran. It contradicts the Quran. It's incompatible to the Quran. We have to see. If the hadith conflicts with the Quran, then this hadith is rejected. For example, we have in Mu'tabarat As-Sukuni, this hadith is reliable. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام he, on the authority of Imam Sadiq, قال رسول الله, he narrates Rasulullah saying, إن على كل حق حقيقة. Every truth has a sign. You can discern what is truth and what is false. وعلى كل صواب نورا فما وافق كتاب الله فخذوه. That which is compatible to the Quran, accept it. Take it. وما خالف كتاب الله فدعوه. And that which is contrary to the Quran, contradicts the Quran, reject it. This is a very important criteria, my dear brothers and sisters, that the hadith has to be exposed to the Quran. We check the validity of any hadith according to its compatibility to the Quran. If it's compatible with the Quran and it has a reliable chain of narrators, it is accepted. But if it has a reliable chain of narrators, but it is not compatible to the Quran, our ulama don't accept the hadith that contradicts or is incompatible to the Quran. طيب. صلى على محمد وعلى محمد. When we say a hadith has to be compatible to the Quran, what do we mean by this? Here there's two theories. One theory says that the hadith has to be compatible to one of the verses of the Quran, any individual verse. Take any individual verse. This particular hadith is compatible to a specific verse to the Holy Quran. This is one theory, one opinion. Another theory held by Samahat Sayyid al-Sistani and the late Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, rahmatullahi alayh, they say that compatibility to the Quran doesn't necessarily mean compatibility to a specific verse. The hadith has to be compatible to the overall spirit of the Quran. The overall spirit of the al-muwafiqa li ruh al-Quran. So perhaps there's a narration that doesn't conflict with a specific verse, but it conflicts with the overall spirit of the Quran. You could say that this hadith, it conflicts with the overall spirit of the message of the Quran. This is not the message of the Quran. Although it doesn't conflict with a specific verse, this hadith will be rejected if it conflicts with the overall spirit of the Quran. And this is a theory held by the two esteemed Sayyids that I mentioned, Sayyid Sistani and Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. Let me give you an example. وَصَلَّ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. We have some narrations. They fulfill the first criteria of having authority, of having hujjiyah, but they don't fulfill the second criteria. They have the criteria of having a credible chain of narrators, but they are not compatible to the Holy Quran. For example, معتبرة مسعدة بن زياد عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام. This hadith has an authentic, reliable, credible chain of narrators on the authority of Imam Al-Sadiq عليه السلام. قال أمير المؤمنين. Imam Al-Sadiq narrates from his grandfather Ali ibn Abi Talib, إياكم ونكاح الزنج فإنهم خلق مشوه. Be careful and do not marry black people. Do not marry black people. طيب. The hadith is found in, for example, Al-Kafi, and it has an authentic chain of narrators. And the Imam is saying, do not marry Az-Zanj, which are a group of black people. How do we deal with a hadith that has a racist connotation, a racist implication? Another hadith, رواية علي بن داود الحداد عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام قال لا تناكحوا الزنج والخزر فإن لهم أرحاما تدل على غير وفاء. Do not marry from these two ethnic nationalities, Az-Zanj, which are a group of black people, والخزر, because they might not be loyal. Don't marry them because they not be loyal. And then والسند والهند والقند ليس فيهم نجيب. These three nationalities, ethnicities, Sind, Hind, and Qind. Qind meaning Kandahar, in modern day Afghanistan. These people will not be good, righteous. طيب. What do we do with such narrations that we have in our books of hadith and books like Al-Kafi? Here, Samahat Sayyid Sistani and Al-Shaheed Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, they say we reject these narrations. We reject them and that we do not ascribe them to the Imams. We don't say that the Imams stated these hadith. Why? Because they conflict with the overall spirit of the Quran. The Quran is against racism. The Quran teaches us that all human beings are equal. No human being has value over another human being except through piety. Inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum. That is the overall spirit of the Quran. The Quran goes against human superiority. One human race having superiority over another race. The idea, the notion of racism is rejected by the Quran. That's the overall spirit of the Quran, and hence these narrations conflict and are incompatible with the Quran. Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum 'inda Allahi atqakum. The best of you. We created you from a man and a woman, or from men and women. And we made you into tribes and nations so that you may meet the best of you are the most righteous of you, the most pious, not the ones that speak the Arabic language or come from Quraysh or Mecca or what have you. In another verse, Allah says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. From Allah's signs is that He created for you the skies and the earth and your different tongues. Your different tongues. This is a sign of Allah's greatness, that we speak various tongues and we speak various languages. This is a sign of Allah's greatness. After that, the Imam would say, for example, don't marry so-and-so, people from Hind, Sind, Hind, or Zenj, and marry from others. This goes against the overall spirit of the Holy Quran. Wa sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We believe, this was all an introduction. We believe that divorce is extremely looked down upon in Islam, according to both Sunnis and Shias. Divorce is extremely looked down upon. أبغض الحلال عند الله عز وجل. It is halal, but it is extremely hated in Islam. In a hadith, معتبرة ابن أبي عمير, the hadith is authentic on the authority of Imam Al-Sadiq عن أبي عبد الله, ما من شيء مما أحله الله عز وجل أبغض إليه من الطلاق. There is nothing that Allah made lawful more hated in the eyes of Allah than divorce. وأن الله يبغض المطلاق المذواق. Allah hates those who divorce numerous times just to taste different flavors. Have you seen those that go to an ice cream parlor and they taste? They get a taste of everything. There are some individuals, they want to get a taste of not ice cream, but individuals, of humans. So they marry and they divorce. They marry and they divorce and they marry. The Imam says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُبْغِضُ الْمَطْلَاقِ. Matlaq is someone who divorces several times. Al-midwaq, that wants to taste, that wants to. وعن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام إن الله عز وجل يحب البيت الذي فيه العرس أو العرس ويبغض البيت الذي فيه الطلاق. Allah loves a house that has marriage and hates a house that has divorce. Having said that, knowing that in Islam divorce is looked down upon and it is hated, we have certain hadith, and we live the occasion of the birthday of Imam Al-Hassan al-Mujtaba, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, an Imam, Allahumma salli alayhi, an Imam that was oppressed in his life, oppressed after his life, and even after his death. We have numerous traditions in our sources that Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam divorced numerously, up to 50 times. Up to 50 times. The Imam would marry and divorce, marry and divorce, marry and divorce. To the point that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in the city of Kufa stood on the minbar and he said, "Oh people, do not give your daughters to my son Al-Hassan, because he divorces numerously. We have such a hadith. For example, in Kitab Al-Mahasin by Al-Barqi, which is one of our reliable books of hadith, Sahihatu Abdullah ibn Sinan. This hadith is sahih. It has an authentic chain of narrators. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام, on the authority of Imam Sadiq, أتى رجل أمير المؤمنين عليا عليه السلام فقال له جئتك مستشيرا. A man came to Amir al-Mu'mineen asking him for advice, telling him, إن الحسن والحسين وعبد الله بن جعفر خطبوا إلي. 3 individuals have proposed to my daughter, your sons Al-Hassan, your son Al-Hussein, and Abdullah ibn Ja'far, your nephew. Telling Amir al-Mu'mineen. Abdullah ibn Ja'far is the nephew of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So who should I give my daughter to? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Al-Mustashara Mu'taman. As long as you've asked me, I have to be honest and truthful. أما الحسن فإنه مطلاق للنساء. As for my son Hassan, he numerously divorces his wives. ولكن زوجها الحسين. Give your daughter to my son Hussein. فإنه خير لابنتك. He is better for your daughter than my son Al-Hassan. This is a hadith. Another hadith found in Al-Kafi. And the chain of narrators is also reliable. موثقة عبد الله بن سنان عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام إن عليا قال وهو على المنبر. Amir al-Mu'mineen stood on the minbar and he said, لا تزوجوا الحسن. Do not give your daughters to my son Al-Hassan. فإنه رجل مطلاق. For he is a man that repeatedly divorces. فقام رجل من همدان. A man from Hamadan, modern day a city, a very beautiful city in Iran. He stood up and he said, قال بلى والله لنزوجنه وهو ابن رسول الله وابن أمير المؤمنين. He said, no, my master, we will marry him. We will give him our daughters. He's the son of Rasulullah and he's your son. فإن شاء أمسك وإن شاء طلق. It's up to him if he wants to divorce our daughters or he wants to keep them. The choice is his. But we want to have the honor of having him as our son-in-law. And another hadith in Al-Kafi, صحيحة يحيى بن أبي العلاء عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام أن الحسن بن علي طلق 50 امرأة. The hadith says that Imam Al-Hassan divorced 50 women. فقام علي بالكوفة. Amir al-Mu'mineen stood in Al-Kufa, and the same hadith, he told them, don't give your daughters to my son, Imam Al-Hassan. طيب, what do we do with such a hadith? Such a hadith that can affect the sanctity of Imam Al-Hassan, what do we do with them? There are 3 theories how to deal with such a hadith. وصلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. The first theory, the first position is that there's nothing wrong with these hadith. There's nothing wrong. Yes, Imam Al-Hassan divorced numerous times. Why? Because he was the first grandson of Rasulullah, the eldest grandson of Rasulullah, and the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. People wanted to be honored by having him be their son-in-law. They were honored that he would marry their daughter. And so to accompany everyone, he would have to marry and then divorce. Marry and then divorce. Because men would come to him, they wanted to have the honor of him marrying their daughters, and he did not want to say no to anyone. And so that is why he divorced numerous times. Not out of lust, not out of sexual desire, not because he wanted to taste, but because he wanted to accompany everyone. He wanted to say yes and not to say no to those who wanted to have the honor of being their son-in-law. And hence, we do not reject these hadith. In fact, it is forbidden. It is forbidden to reject any hadith, especially if it has a reliable chain of narrators. Hence, we do not reject these hadith. We accept them. And there's no problem of saying that Imam Al-Hassan divorced numerous times. At the end of the day, divorce is halal. It is not haram. And if there's a maslahah, if there's a benefit to it, then there is no problem. This is the first theory. This is the first approach. The first opinion regarding these hadith. The second opinion says that we reject these hadith completely and wholly. We reject these hadith. In fact, this was Umawi propaganda against Imam Al-Hassan alayhi salam. To disrespect him, to dishonor him, to distort his image in the eyes of Muslims. How do you destroy a person? How do you destroy a person? One, you could assassinate the person physically. Two, you can assassinate his character and his personality. So by fabricating a hadith, fabricating stories that Imam Al-Hassan married 50 times and he divorced 50 times, it will destroy, it will distort his image in people's minds and in people's hearts. And so these hadith were forged. Talaq, divorce is something hated in Islam. It is something discouraged in Islam. How can an infallible imam divorce numerous times and perform something that is so discouraged, something that is highly makruh in Islam? The third opinion states that we don't know. We don't know. We simply don't know. Do we reject the hadith? We can't reject the hadith. To say that the imams did not say this, reject the hadith in Al-Kafi, in Al-Mahasin, especially if it has a reliable chain of narrators, we can't reject the hadith. Do we accept it? It's hard to accept such a hadith. Why? Because it can insult Imam Al-Hassan. It could be seen as an insult to Imam Al-Hassan. Hence we say we don't know. نَرَدُّ عِلْمَهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ. We say that Allah knows best. And the Imams know best. In fact, we have several narrations that say if you come across a hadith that it doesn't make sense to you, doesn't mean that you should reject the hadith. Just because it doesn't make sense to you in this time and place, in a modern context, well, times have changed. What was acceptable 1,000 years ago is not acceptable today. And what is acceptable today, it might not be acceptable 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years from now. Times change, customs change, laws change. So just because a hadith does not make sense to me now, it doesn't mean that the Imam did not state such a hadith, and it gives me the right to reject it. There's a hadith, Sahihatu Abu Ubaidah al-Hadda and Abi Ja'far al-Baqir alayhi salam. Imam al-Baqir says, أما والله أن أحب أصحابي إلي أروعهم وأفقههم وأكتمهم لحديثنا. The best of my companions are those that are righteous, those that are pious, and those that conceal our ahadith. They don't expose our ahadith. وأن أسوأهم عندي حالا وأمقتهم إلي الذي إذا سمع الحديث ينسب إلينا. And the worst of my companions, the worst of my followers are those who hear a hadith being transmitted on our authority. فلم يعقله يروى عنا. The hadith is being narrated on our authority. فلم يعقله. He doesn't comprehend the hadith. ولم يقبله قلبه. His heart cannot accept the hadith. اشمأز منه وجحده وكفر بمن دان به. He's disgusted by the hadith. He rejects the hadith. He ridicules the hadith. وهو لا يدري لعل الحديث من عندنا خرج. And he doesn't know, perhaps we did state the hadith. We did say this narration. وإلينا أسند فيكون بذلك خارجا من ولايتنا. And by doing that, he abandons our wilaya. This third position is moderate. It says we don't reject the hadith that pertain to Imam Al-Hassan's numerous divorces and say that they are forged and fabricated. And that's a very dangerous claim, because these hadith are in Al-Kafi, in Al-Mahasin. And we know that the authors of these books, they filtered the hadith. They only took what is reliable. And on the other hand, perhaps the hadith can affect the sanctity and holiness of Imam Al-Hassan. Hence we say we don't know. We don't know. Was this hadith stated or it is not stated? We leave it to the Imams, for the Imams to decide. We offer our congratulations to the mu'mineen and mu'minat on the auspicious occasion of the birthday of Imam Al-Hassan Mushtaba. We ask Allah to grant us His ziyarah in dunya and His shafa'ah in akhirah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم إني أسألك أن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم في الأمر الحكيم من القضاء الذي لا يرد ولا يبدل أن تكتبني من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور حجهم المشكور سعيهم المغفور ذنوبهم المكفر عنهم سيئاتهم، وأن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر أن تطيل عمري في خير وعافية، وتوسع في رزقي، وتجعلني ممن تنتصر به لدينك ولا تستبدل بي غيري. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتي هذه ولك قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه، ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. الفاتحة مع الصلوات.